The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta is where the rivers of the Sierra Nevada merge before heading toward San Francisco Bay. Before the gold rush, it was a vast maze of sloughs and channels. Today, it is a series of islands with farms and unique historic communities, bordered by 1,100 miles of levees. Salmon pass through the delta on their way to and from the Pacific Ocean. Thousands of migratory birds need the delta for shelter and food. The delta is also a critical component of the state's water supply. This supply sustains California's residents from Silicon Valley to San Diego. It helps to grow much of the nation's fruits and vegetables. About 30% of Southern California's total water supply moves across the delta every year. A single wet winter in Northern California can refill all Southland reservoirs. But the delta is in trouble. Many native fish are in serious decline. Non-native fish and invasive plants have overwhelmed indigenous species. 95% of the original tidal wetlands have been erased by levee construction. Upstream, levees and development have blocked 95% of the original floodplain. As the delta environment has declined, so has the reliability of this water supply for all of California. When water supply is plentiful in the winter, court restrictions are reducing deliveries to protect fish, such as the delta smelt. The system can no longer capture supplies when nature provides them. Something must be done. Nature also presents other threats. A levee collapse due to an earthquake could interrupt water delivery to 25 million state residents for up to 3 years. Sea level rise will increase salinity at the existing pumps. The status quo is a threat both to the state's economy and the delta's environment. Since 2006, state and federal leaders have been steadily working toward a comprehensive solution. It's called the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. To ensure reliable supplies and help protect the economy, the BDCP seeks to modernize the delta's major water systems. New intakes would be constructed in the northern delta on the Sacramento River. Fish would safely pass by thanks to state-of-the-art fish screens. And new twin tunnels would carry this supply more than 30 miles to the existing aqueduct facilities in the southern delta. The plan would greatly improve water supply reliability. The tunnels would protect supplies from threats such as earthquakes and flooding. The plan also includes wide-scale ecosystem restoration. Tens of thousands of acres of restored wetlands and floodplain will provide habitat for fish, wildlife, and plant species. Restoration and tunnel construction would create more than 150,000 new jobs. For Southern California residents, the cost to modernize this system is likely about $5 a month for a typical household water bill. Public funds would pay for the habitat restoration. This is a 50-year plan to steadily transform and stabilize the delta over time. Southern California has a long-term water plan to develop more local solutions through conservation and recycling and desalination. But imported supplies will remain an important foundation, providing valuable water quality and supply benefits. Stored water from the delta is essential to withstand prolonged droughts. The BDCP is part of Southern California's water solution that builds a sustainable future for generations to come.
Well, good morning, everyone. As Scott indicated, I'm Tony Tartaglia with the Southern California Gas Company. I'll be your moderator today. I'd like to give you a little information about our first panel and what they're going to address. They're going to be addressing current drought and the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, better known as the BDCP, including its technical issues, EIR process, economic impacts, and consumer costs. We'll discuss our outreach efforts on the BDCP and why the plan is important to business and residents of Glendale. I'd like to start by briefly introducing our panelists and describing what topics each of them will be discussing. For detailed information on each person's bio, I refer you to the flyer that was distributed with the program. First, we have Jeff Kightlinger, General Manager of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Jeff will discuss the drought, what Metropolitan, the Governor's Office, and the Obama administration are doing in response, and why the BDCP is important to the region. Rich Atwater is the Executive Director of the Southern California Water Committee. Rich will talk about the public outreach efforts on the BDCP and how his organization is working to build statewide consensus on Delta issues and how you can voice your opinion on the issue. Next, we'll talk with Laura Friedman. She's a member of the Glendale City Council and Metropolitan's Board of Directors. She is the delegate from the city. Wearing these two hats, Laura is a crucial bridge between the Metropolitan Water District and Glendale, which is a founding city of Metropolitan. Laura will discuss both of her roles in more depth, how she's advocating on the BDCP and the federal, state, and local levels, and why the city should support the BDCP. Our last two panelists are Steve Zurn, the General Manager of Glendale Water and Power and also the Director of Public Works, and Ramon Abueg, the Chief Assistant General Manager of Glendale Water and Power. Both will discuss the importance of the Bay Delta water as an important water resource for the city and the initiatives that GWP will be taking in terms of local water resources. Jeff, let's begin with you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So I'm Jeff Kightlinger. I'm the General Manager of the Metropolitan Water District. I thought I'd begin a little bit with just who is Metropolitan and what it is exactly that we do. Metropolitan was founded in 1928 when the need in Southern California grew to build large-scale infrastructure to import water from the Colorado River. No one city, even Los Angeles, felt they could do this on their own. And so 13 cities got together and formed the Metropolitan Water District to do that and become the wholesale provider of imported water to Southern California and then sell that to the cities. Glendale was one of those original 13 cities that founded the Metropolitan Water District. At that time, it was pretty much Los Angeles County and a little bit of Orange County that joined Metropolitan. Over time, we have grown from Ventura, San Bernardino, Riverside, and San Diego counties have all effectively joined Metropolitan. And today, we provide water now to 19 million people in Southern California. In effect, that's 1 out of every 2 Californians are living here in Southern California, and Metropolitan imports that water from the Colorado River. Now, that water came online. We built the great aqueducts and the Hoover Dam and Parker Dam to do that in the 1930s. And then in the 1960s, the growth in Southern California had been such that we needed another new source of supply. And so Metropolitan, after much debate and discussion, teamed up with the state of California to build the State Water Project. Metropolitan, with a lot of friendly persuasion from then Governor Pat Brown, agreed to pay half the cost of the largest, most expensive water system ever built in the world for the next 75 years. So that we have a contract with the state of California where we pay half the cost of this system, and it runs through 2035. So we're kind of coming to the end of our 75-year mortgage on the State Water Project. But that was a huge financial undertaking and commitment by Southern California to do that. And if ever you drive up I-5, you can just imagine what that project was, building that in the 1960s. It starts up in the just south of the Stockton area in the south part of the Delta, and you have 300 plus miles of aqueducts, pumping stations, all moving water throughout that whole Central Valley, created farming throughout most of the Central Valley that otherwise wouldn't be there. And the source of that water actually goes all the way up to Lake Oroville, where they built the dam that captures water off the Feather River. So here we are today. Metropolitan supplies a little more than half of all the water consumed in Southern California. And those two main sources are the Colorado River and the State Water Project. The numbers are in water speak. It's about 4 million acre-feet of water consumed in Southern California. An acre-foot of water is 326,000 gallons. And we like to think of it as each acre-foot supplies about 2 households for an entire year. So Metropolitan sells about 2 million acre feet of water a year, and the rest of that is what we call local supply, meaning our groundwater basins. This rainfall, this little bit of rainfall we got today will be captured in the San Fernando and San Gabriel and Orange County water basins and then be pumped up later for use. That helps. That's about, like I said, that's a good chunk of our local water, a little bit from our local rivers. And then the city of Los Angeles has its separate imported supply from the Owens Valley that isn't counted as part of Metropolitan's. So what we've done is, when you think about it, we've had some droughts. If you've grown up in California, droughts are a part of life, just like our earthquakes. So 1977, California had a terrific drought. It's on record as our driest year in recorded history still, although, as we're going to talk about, this year is threatening to break that record. But we had a 1977 drought, very tough position. Parts of California were in emergency situations, pretty much dire straits. Not here so much in Southern California. And we had this diversity of supply. We get water from the Colorado River. Well, that comes from the Rocky Mountains all the way up to Wyoming and upper Colorado states, so it's coming from a long ways away. So even though Southern California and California was racked by drought in 1977, Metropolitan was able to rely on its Colorado River supplies. Owens Valley, this was before things like the Mono Lake decision. The city of Los Angeles still had a reasonable supply coming out of the Owens Valley. And so what we did, there was a very young governor named Jerry Brown at the time in 1977. He asked if Metropolitan could help. And what Metropolitan did was we had planned on taking basically half our water from the State Water Project that year and half from the Colorado River Aqueduct. It's very important that we blend those two sources to keep water quality, keep our salts down. And instead, what we did was we left virtually all our State Water Project to help the rest of California. We turned our Colorado River Aqueduct on full bore that spring. We ran it, and it actually delivered more water than its rated capacity. We had engineers strapping on sideboards where it would lap over, and we just moved as much water we could off the Colorado River into Southern California. And it was Metropolitan water that kept Marin County from going belly up. Their reservoirs were going to become completely empty, and they were going to have to truck water to households throughout Marin by summer of 1977. And instead, Metropolitan water was delivered to them to keep Marin County from going under that year. So that was a big drought response. The next major drought came along at the end of the 1980s, 1988 to 1991, another drought. But this time, the reaction in Southern California was tougher, and we actually had to ration water for the first time. Metropolitan had to impose rationing throughout Southern California. And the reason we had to do that is because we'd grown. Our demands were such that we couldn't have enough water just from the Colorado River because our population had grown. At that time in 1988 to 91, or 1991, the population in Southern California was close to 14 million people. We'd grown about 5-6 million people from 1977. And so our demands had gone up, and it still remains one of the high water delivery years in Metropolitan's history. We were selling at that point close to 2.5 million acre feet. But once we got through that drought, it was a real wake-up call. We realized we had to change some of the things we were doing in Southern California. We couldn't just rely on steadily increasing our imported water supply to meet the population and economic growth in the region. And so Metropolitan embarked on a 20-year plan to change how we kind of do business here. And what we did was we had to push down demand. We couldn't keep growing the demand even though our population was growing. And so we started spending money in a systematized regional approach to things like conservation, recycling, water reclamation, cleaning up groundwater basins. We began putting in significant dollars into that every single year. Today, Metropolitan spends, every year we spend $20 million just on conservation rebates to get people to buy the right devices that go in their household that save water. We put about another $60 million a year in projects that Metropolitan doesn't sell the water. They're recycled water, they're reclaimed water, groundwater cleanup. All these things in a curious business approach so that we can sell less water. Well, it's really worked. When I said Metropolitan sold, in 1990, we sold 2.5 million acre feet. This year, Let's just go to 2013. Last year, in a very dry year, where demands were high on Metropolitan, we sold 2 million acre feet. 1990, we were 14 million people. Today, we're serving 19 million people. So we've added 5 million people and still reduced our demand and reduced our need for imported water by 20% over this last couple of decades. So it's quite an achievement. But just pushing down the demand wasn't enough. We actually have to store that water that we weren't using so we'd be prepared for droughts. So Metropolitan has invested over these last couple decades over $3 to $4 billion in storage programs alone. We built a massive reservoir out in Riverside called Diamond Valley Lake. It's the largest reservoir that's been built in the state since the 1960s. It stores 810,000 acre feet. It's a huge supply. It's really this region's insurance policy. But we also then invested in all the groundwater basins in Southern California. We developed programs where we can store water in the Coachella Valley, in the Central Valley. We also developed storage programs with the federal government, and Metropolitan now can store water in Lake Mead behind Hoover Dam. So we have grown our storage portfolio to the point where we can take multiple year droughts in Southern California. So this year, when the governor's office said there's 17 communities that have less than 30 days of water because this drought is so striking, Metropolitan's in relatively solid shape. We have several years worth of water, not 30 days. We have years worth of water to deal with these kinds of droughts. But it's been a serious investment on this region to go and be prepared for it. Well, where does this all tie back to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan? Well, the reason all this works is because we have to mix and match our supplies. We're developing the whole concept of a diverse portfolio. So we have grown our recycled water in Southern California. We've pushed conservation very successfully. We are doing reclaimed water. We're starting to do some ocean desalination. We've been doing inland brackish water desalination for quite a while. All these things are great local supplies we can do, but we also have to have that steady imported supply. We've spent a lot of money shoring up the Colorado River so that we can have steady water even during a drought like we're having currently on the Colorado River. We're going to get basically a full Colorado River aqueduct this year. But our other main source of supply, the State Water Project, what you just saw in the video about the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, that's under serious threats. It's threatened because that levee system is crumbling. It's 1960s technology. We haven't spent any money on it to modernize and upgrade the system that was built in the 1960s. We don't have the state-of-the-art fish screens. We have to pump now around the schedule of the fish. You know, if you just look at how we used to move water, we would move water at nighttime and in the winter as much as we could. Why did we do that? Well, that's when energy is cheap. You move water during the winter, move it into our reservoirs down here. We would pump off-peak so we could pump at night so we could save the electricity during the day. It was a very efficient way to operate the system. Now we've turned it completely on its head. The only time we can really pump and move the water is in the hottest summer months because that's when the fish retreat from the delta. We have to pump 24/7 during those windows we get when the fish aren't there, even in the peak of the summer days, straining our entire electrical grid throughout the state because we can't pump during nighttime in the winter because that's when the fish are spawning or moving. So we have turned our system on its head, and we need to modernize and upgrade this so we can go back to a more efficient way of operating it. It's better for the fish, it's better for the environment, it makes sense environmentally as well as saves energy. So it's sort of this very smart solution. And it's not a more water solution, it's just getting back to reliability and modernizing and upgrading it. Well, the good news is the governor is very much in support of it and wants to see this completed. It certainly does have cost ramifications. We've been working very closely with the governor administration and the Brown administration to try and get the permits lined up, try and get it built as efficiently and cleanly as possible. The current best preferred approach is to do this by tunnels. And it's going to be an engineering feat. It's going to be two 35-foot tunnels, almost 40 feet in diameter, about 38 miles long. So very large tunnels, very large bore tunnels that will be underground. The good thing about tunneling technology is it's advanced so much in the last couple of decades. We're seeing this kind of tunneling work take place throughout the world. And the great thing about it is it reduces the footprint. Once it's done, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. You don't have these large canals crisscrossing the environment that you have to then build around them. And so once it's completed, you pretty much won't even be aware it's there. And it can safely and effectively deliver water. It's energy efficient. It'll be entirely delivered by gravity. The cost of it, you saw some of that in the video. Right now, the projections are somewhere around $15 billion. Seems like a lot of money, because it is a lot of money. But the reality is it's spread across 25 million Californians who would be getting their water from it, about 4 million acres of irrigated farmland, and all those communities, all those stakeholders would be paying for the cost of that. At the end of the day, we estimated it's about $5 a month over a decade added to people's household water bills. And it's kind of what you have to do. We have to build these systems every 30 years. You know, we built the Los Angeles Aqueduct in 1900. We built the Colorado River Aqueduct in the 1930s. We built the State Water Project in the 1960s. And the reality is most of California has kind of taken off since then and sort of rested on our forefathers' laurels and not invested much. Here in Southern California, we've continued to invest. We've built reservoirs. We've tried to work to drought-proof our system. But the state needs to step up and do this next major round of investment in our water system and supply if we're going to continue to have a thriving economy here in California. So we think it's very important. It's at its crucial time now. We've been working very closely with Rich here to make sure Southern California is aware of this big project that the governor and the president are going to have to make decisions on what we're going to build, how we're going to pay for it, and are we going to get the political support necessary to do these kinds of investments. And the decision time frame is pretty much the first quarter of 15. So the end of this year and beginning of next year. So the next 10, 12 months are going to be very critical as we go through the environmental process and review process to get this completed. A couple words real briefly on the drought. It's always funny. As soon as you say drought, it starts to rain. So I know we had a little bit of rain here this morning, but we are shaping up to have, this is an amazing year. I mean, I've been doing this business a while now, and I've never seen anything like this. We were so far off the charts that you almost couldn't even figure out where we were on the charts. We weren't even appearing on the charts. 1977 mentioned young Jerry Brown here, the driest year in our recorded history. We've had a series of major storms, luckily the last couple of weeks. All they've done is get us close to 1977 levels. So we're hoping to get back to the worst year ever and just tie that. That's our kind of best case scenario as we sit here today, that we can maybe get to tie for the worst year ever as opposed to setting new records for beyond the worst year ever. So you're going to see a lot of discussion over things that have to take place in California. The governor is working with the legislature. They put together packages to get some, at least to get some drought response dollars moving as quickly as they can. Most of this will be aimed at the Central Valley. They're going to be hit very hard. You're going to see 500,000 acres plus fallowed. It may be up to 1 million acres. These will be row crops, non-permanent crops. You know, so eventually you'll see prices spike in certain types of things because there'll be a lot of lettuce and tomatoes and things like that that just can't be planted this year. You know, the farmers are going to have to do triage. They're going to have to protect the permanent crops they've planted. So the grapes and the nuts and the, fruit orchards will be saved as they have to let other things go. That's going to create all sorts of issues. You're going to see dust issues in the Central Valley. You're going to have 30, 40, 50% unemployment in some of these towns in the Central Valley. So there's going to be a lot of dislocation, a lot of pain as we work our way through this drought. Here in Southern California, Metropolitan's going to be pushing on everybody to do their part to conserve. We're proud of the fact that we've stored a lot of water, that we've built a system that is designed to handle droughts without major dislocation. But we don't know if we're talking, right now we're in like the third dry year, with this year being extremely dry. But we've seen history where these have gone on for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, sometimes even beyond that. So we're asking people to really pay attention. This is a good time to conserve water. Let's stretch our reserves as long as we can. Right now we're asking everybody to try and shoot for 20% We'll be monitoring this throughout the year. We're going to look at, do we need to amp up the restrictions? We're certainly going to be, our board has taken action to push money through, thanks to folks like Director Friedman. I went to the board a month ago and asked if we would double our budget. In the past, when we've asked people to conserve, they've gone out and bought those things, like the front-loading washers, the ultra-low flush toilets, and we offer rebates. So I said we normally spend $20 million a year on that. I asked, given the drought, if we could have more money, and the board said, let's make it $40 million this year. So we're urging people to do what they can to save water, and basically also just to kind of help the whole state as we go through what's looking to be a pretty tough situation.
The population doesn't think we have a drought. The noise is still in the background. So now I'd like to have Rich Atwater, Executive Director of Southern California Water Committee, talk about some of the outreach efforts for the BDCP.
As a local resident, I live not in Glendale, but in La Cañada, and in the water coordination of activities here locally, we realize how important reliable water supplies are to not just Glendale residents, but all of Southern California. Just a quick little background. Executive Director of Southern California Water Committee. We represent water districts, cities like Glendale, City of Los Angeles, Burbank, Pasadena, other cities throughout Southern California, business leaders, the Greater LA Chamber, other business organizations like the Orange County Business Council, VICA, or very actively we work with them to educate them and collaborate on the importance of water and making sure that we have a reliable, cost-effective supply. Let me just give you a little background on what we've been doing for the last year and a half, working with Metropolitan and with the state of California and community leaders throughout Southern California on this whole issue of how do we address this 1960s infrastructure, the Delta, and how vulnerable it is. And so let me just walk through a few slides and I'll talk about the process. Just again to highlight what Jeff just pointed out, just a simple graphic. Southern California with 19 million people, Colorado River, Northern California is about half of our water supply. And of course here locally, Glendale with its recycled water system that's been ongoing for a couple of decades now. You're proud of your local supplies and the water you pump from the San Fernando Valley. But as you know, you had lots of challenges with hexavalent chromium and other contaminants. And so local supplies also need to be very carefully managed. Just a little background on the Delta, where it's located up on in the confluence of the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River, as the video kind of, and just remind you that the whole state is interconnected with that. In fact, the governor said this quite well when he came down to Metropolitan, when he talked to the media 3 weeks ago. It's one state, and we need to talk about a statewide solution. So whether you live in San Jose, San Francisco, San Diego, or here in Glendale, we're all dependent on water from the watershed of the Delta. And it's important to the whole state to do that. And one of the reasons why we're doing this, the video kind of explains it quite well, but these two pictures explain why we're in trouble. The U.S. Geological Survey, you may have heard of Dr. Lucy Jones. She is an expert scientist at Caltech in the U.S. Geological Survey. She's advising Mayor Garcetti right now on seismic risks in Los Angeles, but she's the one who's pointing out that in a big earthquake, we could lose our water supply from Northern California for 2 to 3 years. So droughts and earthquakes, and in fact, those levees, as you can see on the left, are very vulnerable, and even in a big flood, we could lose our water supply from Northern California. So that's the basic argument. So what we've done over the last 3 years is working closely with the state of California, Metropolitan, and water districts and other water experts throughout Southern California, is to go out and give this message. This is the proposal that Jeff just talked about. It's to build these 2 tunnels, and also we would spend about $5 billion over 50 years to restore the habitat. What people forget is when you saw the video, in the last 150 years, since the gold mining days, that estuary, the largest estuary on the west coast of North and South America, has been highly changed. And what we're trying to do is to restore that habitat, but also provide a reliable water supply with those facilities. And that's why you see the ecosystem restoration. That's really achieving 2 goals: environmental restoration and ensuring that people in Glendale and throughout California have a reliable supply from Northern California. So we talked about the facilities. Some of the other issues that we need to talk about is like agriculture. This is, California is the #1 leading agricultural state, and of course, over 25 million people are dependent on water from the portion of their supply from Northern California. And then we have other long-term issues like climate change and sea level rise, which will exacerbate the problems, and why the tunnels would be very useful. As Jeff pointed out, statewide, and when we talk about Southern California, we have a big effort in Metropolitan and at the Southern California Water Committee. We work with communities and water districts throughout Southern California how to promote and encourage everybody to conserve and utilize and develop local supplies like you have in Glendale. We talked about the money. The bottom line is, what I'd like to say about that is just simply put, the cost of about $5 is an increase, not today, it's not next year. That increase per month is in about 10 to 12 years from now on your water bill in Glendale, or whether you live in Los Angeles or San Diego. The only point that I want to make about that, as we talk to the public, is that over the last 25 years, with bridges, schools, hospitals, the state prison, all these old facilities have been upgraded, and we've spent over $40 billion with taxpayer money over the last 2 decades to upgrade those critical facilities to make sure that they can survive the next earthquake. That's exactly what we need to do with our water facilities. The last thing I'd say is we have lots of information on this. We've had the National Academy of Science, independent experts from across the world. As Jeff pointed out, the tunnel designs are really cutting-edge technology. San Francisco spent about $4 billion on a new tunnel from their supply from Yosemite Park over the last decade for the same reason, because it goes across the San Andreas Fault. So it's the same kind of technology that we'd want to use in the Delta. The only thing I'd say is, in our case, what I'd like to do is talk about the process, and then I'll turn it over to Laura. Last night was at the City of Pasadena. We made a presentation like this. Tomorrow I'll be down in the South Bay Council of Governments. Last week, a resolution of support was unanimously approved by the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. That's what we're doing throughout the region. The process is that the comment period for this will, and you can get the information, web pages in this day and age, we have more information than you could possibly read. It's about 30,000 pages, but we have short executive summaries, fact sheets, and all that type of thing. But we're in the process of a California CEQA document, for everybody in the acronyms, with an environmental document and the proposed alternative with 9 other alternatives. And that comment period will now be completed in mid-June. And as Jeff pointed out, then later this year, next year, the state of California and the federal government, the Obama administration, because it is a federal permit, will have to approve this. And so what we're trying to do is get as many letters of support, get people informed so that they can speak up about this, and get communities to understand the implications of it and realize for the next 50 years we need to make an investment in our water supply system, much like we did, as Jeff pointed out, in 1960. The actions taken then really provided a reliable supply for Glendale and all of Southern California for the last 50 or 60 years, but now it's time to kind of reinvest and upgrade that facility to meet the modern 21st century and the challenges behind that. So our goal at the Southern California Water Committee, you can get a hold of me. We have e-newsletters, we make presentations, I do these throughout Southern California all the time. We have other people who would be happy to help out. We like to organize this kind of information. And so we're really pleased to have the Glendale Chamber host this meeting, as this is the sort of thing that we'd like to do is help you better understand the implications of this so you can make an informed decision. Thank you very much.
I'd like to now have Laura Friedman, who wears 2 hats as our Glendale City Council member as well as a member of MWD, talk about how this role is being brought down to our local level.
I was taken on one of the Metropolitan water tours where they take individuals to see these water systems, and I got interested in water then. And when I was elected to city council, I wanted to get on the Met board because water is a lifeblood of California. We can't survive without it. It's always been politicized, and some of you may have heard the old line that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And we're kind of going back into that kind of period right now where there's a lot of discussion and argument over what to do with California's water supply. And I felt that we as a city could gain from having not so much the water geeks talking about water, but someone who was more of an intermediary who could talk to constituents, but also get educated about water so I can bring that sort of layperson's perspective home. So I've been on the Met board for about 3 years, and it's very interesting. It's a huge education. I feel not up to speed in all of the technicalities, so I'm going to ask my fellow panelists to correct me if I say anything out of line, but I wanted to give you my layperson's perspective on what's happening, what the arguments are for and against these solutions, and where we sit as a city. So there are huge challenges, and I think that not everybody in Southern California really understands where their water comes from and how tenuous that supply can be at times. We get hints of that when we have water rationing, but we haven't been in, as Jeff said, having this kind of a drought, but what happens if it extends 5, 6, 7 years? It'll be very difficult for us, and we're used to turning the tap on and the water comes out. And the water's pennies per gallon. It's very, very inexpensive, and yet we don't see it. It's underground. Sometimes people don't see the reason for investing in that kind of infrastructure. The water's just there. So what are the political dynamics right now over the BDCP? Well, first, you hear a lot from the northern parts of California. They tend to see, in my perspective, Southern California as endlessly thirsty and increasingly thirsty, and that these tunnels are going to be a giant straw that's going to suck them dry the way that the Owens Valley at some point was sucked dry by Los Angeles, and they don't want that to happen. So they have that concern. And you hear a lot about these tunnels causing us to take more water. Well, what Jeff didn't mention is that by law, we're restricted in the amount of water that Southern California can draw, and that doesn't change with the creation of the tunnels. We don't get to take more water. Some in Southern California, and maybe some of you in this room, are concerned about the cost. What's this going to cost? And the previous water bond was very, very expensive, and this one's going to be expensive too, but there's a real attempt right now to create a new water bond idea that's going to lower the cost, that's not going to have as much pork as the last bond, which was put together kind of pre-recession and had a lot of pet projects for a lot of areas. So besides improving the water, different cities were getting bike paths and interpretive signage, and all of that was going to be paid for in the bond. So now they're trying to take all that out so that really what you're paying for is just infrastructure. But still, what's it going to cost? Is it worth the cost? Some factions see doing away with environmental regulations that are protecting the environment, protecting the fish as being the solution. And you're hearing right now these alternatives being floated. Let's just get rid of the EPA, let's get rid of the Endangered Species Act, and then we can just take more water. So that's something that's being floated as a solution. On the other side of the coin, there are some environmentalist groups who say, let's not invest in importing foreign water. Let's put all the money in our local supplies, in reclaimed water and desalination, and just wean ourselves completely and immediately off imported water. So some of them are opposed to this plan. And while people in the north are very aware of the BDCP, and if you go to talk to people in the San Francisco area, certainly in the Bay Delta, they're very aware of this. This is something that's very much on their mind, but it's not so much on the mind of Southern California, which is an impediment to this going forward, because we have the biggest number of votes, but if people don't vote for this plan, it's not going to happen. So that's a real impediment to us moving forward. So my personal perspective, of course, my perspective is overshadowed by my role as an elected official because I want to do what's best for my city. I also consider myself an environmentalist, so all of those issues are very important to me as well. So let me go down those list of concerns and challenges and give you my perspective. First, on the north-south conflict was mentioned, we're one state, and we're going to succeed and fail together. Because while the water's coming from the north, the money's coming from the south. And if we have an interrupted supply of water, it's going to have hugely devastating consequences on the business community, which is, I know, is something of concern of a lot of you in this area. If you can't have water, a lot of businesses can't function. Certainly agricultural interests, which is a huge part of this state's economy, are going to be impacted. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to buy my vegetables from farms that are in California. I don't want to buy imported fruits and vegetables coming from Chile and from Mexico and from around the world where I don't exactly know how they're grown and what kind of chemicals have been sprayed on them. I want to support my local economy. And that's going to be difficult in the next few years with this drought, and unless this plan is passed, it's going to be increasingly difficult. Agriculture uses about 80% of the state's water. 80%. They're the ones that are being cut back most in the drought, because no one's going to not give water to people who need to drink it, but they'll take it away from farmland. So the cost, we're talking about $5 a month. But that amount of money is really wiped out for the amount you're going to pay in increased costs for food. If the food can't be grown in California, that commodity becomes more and more expensive as it's being imported. As businesses, as people who are unemployed, you're going to be paying that money in terms of unemployment and food stamps and all of that. It's hugely impactful. So while there is a cost, you also have to judge that in terms of what the cost is on the other side of having a reduced water supply, which is really what we're talking about. It's having a reduced water supply over time, or a less reliable water source. Now, the environmental regulation, some people say if we just forget about the Delta smelt, all of our issues go away. First of all, they don't, because you still have the problems of what happens in an earthquake and in seawater rise, and even without an earthquake, those levees fail. There's subsidence, there's all kinds of issues in the Delta that make it very, very challenged and possibly, not sustainable, and that there are levee collapses that happen without an earthquake. We know that seawater rise is real, and what does that mean? And people talk about what could happen in the levee as California's Katrina. Only here you're talking about cutting off the water supply for tens of millions of people for an extended period of time in a drought possibly where we may not have the supplies and storage. And I'm not trying to say this to panic people, but we have to be realistic about what could happen because it's that important. So the fish is really not the problem, so let's stop blaming the fish. But the fish do cause pumping restrictions, which is why, as Jeff was saying, in the wettest time of the year when you want to be putting water in storage, you know where the water's going? It's going to the ocean. It's not going into storage because you're interrupting the fish supply. So I don't think that getting rid of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Endangered Species Act is a solution. It's very short-sighted. Fishermen are part of the economy as well. And we can have that habitat restoration and make the levee function again and still have that goal of delivering water through this plan. So I think that's really the best way of doing this. And by the way, if you think that the Delta is natural now, it's not. And there's a very interesting article that just came out in The Atlantic. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but they kind of drew the comparison of saying that the Bay Delta right now is about as natural as a parking lot in downtown Los Angeles. It looks nothing like it looked a couple hundred years ago. It was a huge marshland. It's been dredged, it's been leveed, it's been turned into agricultural and suburban areas. But those farmlands look beautiful, but that's not the natural state of that marsh. It's an important area for migratory birds, for fish, and we can restore that. We can have our salmon, which we all love, and still have our water. But to do that, we need to do this plumbing system. Now, lastly, the environmental argument about weaning ourselves completely off off of imported water. I think it's a compelling argument. And it's something that in a lot of ways Met doesn't disagree with. And you heard that we've invested a lot of money over the years in those kinds of projects, in reclaimed water, in desalination, in conservation. But I don't think it's realistic to say we're going to do that tomorrow or next year. We're not going to wean ourselves completely. Too much of the water is coming from other parts of the state. I think it's a goal, and it's a goal that we have to budget for. But I think that you can do both. As we said, this is this is a project that's not indefinite. It's not something that you put in the ground and in 500 years you're still using it. You're talking about a life of 50 years. That's what these capital projects, tend to be. Within that 50 years, I would hope that at some point we're not drawing water anymore from the north. At that point we are using all of that. And there are countries where their sewage water is reclaimed to the point where they're drinking it, and we'll probably get there. But there's a lot of resistance to people to that in California. We're not quite there yet. And the other point that you should know is people who are ratepayers is that water is the most expensive water that we have. Reclaimed water is used for irrigation, but to put the pipes in is extremely expensive to get it all over the place. Desalination, that water is much more expensive than water that you're drawing out of the Colorado River and from the Bay Delta. So the economic cost of immediately weaning ourselves off of that imported water is probably more than people want to pay. It's certainly more than that $5 a month, much, much more. So, as was mentioned, California has become extremely efficient over the years. The fact that we use less water than we used 10 years ago and we have millions more people is really pretty exceptional. We've done a very good job, but we have a long way to go, and there's a lot more conservation that we could do. So that's something we certainly need to concentrate on as we go forward, but we're moving in the right direction. Lastly, in terms of the biggest impediment we have towards the solution is that the North is very galvanized. And I don't mean to divide the state up, but you're hearing a lot of these arguments coming from the northern part of the state. They're extremely galvanized. They're extremely, not everybody. I mean, there is consensus building on this, but you do have certain vocal interests that are very loud about being against this plan and saying you're taking our water. There are water rights, riparian water rights that were developed 150 years ago that basically say if you live next to the water, you kind of get as much as you want and people downstream can take what they can. You have interests because of that are not metered. You have water users that don't have water meters that can draw as much water as they want indefinitely. That's a challenge. There's this feeling that this is mine, you don't get yours, I get mine first. We need to come together as a state and realize that we're all in this together, that what happens in the South is extremely important economically to the future of the northern part of California. But we in the area that are impacted, that have these challenges, being agriculture in Southern California, who are using this imported water, need to realize what a crisis this can be and how important this is for our region. We can't take it for granted. We've got to form consensus about a solution, and we have to advocate for it. Because the voices that are being heard most right now in Washington and Sacramento, or at least for many years, have not been from this region. There hasn't been a united voice about what should be done and how it should be done from the South, from Los Angeles, from these whole areas, San Diego, Los Angeles, Riverside, from all of Southern California. We need to have that consensus, and we need to be vocal about it if we really want things to be done. We need to decide if we're going to do to BDCP, which I think we should, and then we need to go out and spread the word that people need to support it. And that's why I'm glad that you're all here today. You're interested, you want to educate yourselves, and we need to go out and spread the word that we can't just do nothing. We can't just sit around and hope that the drought goes away and hope there's a lot of rain and hope that there's a lot of snowfall and hope that the fish all of a sudden recover spontaneously by themselves and that there's no earthquakes and that our water supply will be uninterrupted. We need to make sure that we have our infrastructure in place to deal with our economy, to deal with our people. We need to actively do that as a region. So that's, in my mind, the biggest impediment to the BDCP and something that all of us can take a part in being a part of the solution. So thanks so much for being here today.
Our current local water company still needs to deal with the issues at hand, conservation, infrastructure, and the like. So I'd like to turn the discussion now to our local agencies.
I'm going to go through rather quickly some of these initial slides because they're what you've heard from the other panelists. And obviously all of these issues impact Glendale tremendously. And you see here we're a drought of epic proportions. As Jeff indicated, I think he put it best, it's so bad that we're shooting for the worst. That's what we're hoping for. We're hoping we can get back to the worst year that we had in quite some time, and that's how bad it is. You know about the declarations, they've been talked about. Go ahead, Ramon. Then you see the state water project allocation, and it has over the last several months, dwindled down to where it is now. First time in the 54 history of the project is zero delivery on that, and that's a huge impact to everyone, but certainly Glendale as well. So what do we need? Here's again some of the supplies points for our water. Some of these have been gone over already, but these are the larger scope of where water is brought into for California residents. In Glendale specific, this is where we're at, and we have to deal here in Glendale and GWP with the same issues that MWD is dealing with. Our infrastructure has to be upgraded and maintained. Our water storage capacities within that infrastructure. We have to look at our own local water development, and we have to preach and practice conservation. It's just a way of life now. And here's where we are locally for our water supplies. You can see we're concentrated mostly up in the top of this, this slide here. This is near the Verdugo Park, Verdugo Wash area. We have our Verdugo Park water treatment plant where we have 2 wells, and then our Glorieta wells that are a little further north, and we have 3 of those wells. The Glorieta wells are producing okay. We've done some upgrades to those to try to increase production. The Verdugo wells are not doing very well. In fact, they're shut down right now for maintenance and evaluation. And we have virtually, in some of those cases, nearly hit bottom on those particular wells. And we're not seeing the water come back up. The drought's part of that. We've pumped the water out of it. There hasn't been reseeding of water. Those are the kind of things that we need to look forward to in the future. On the right-hand column, you'll see where some of our local water supply availability is that we need to go out and do further research and look towards developing more local water. But of course it comes at a cost. So we have to balance that. As Ms. Friedman said, she has a role as a council member, and she expects me as the head of GWP to bring water to all of you at the most economical rate we can. And so we have to look at what the cost is. Of course, in looking at the long term, you have to weigh and balance that as well. Here's current cost of some of the water that we get. The Glendale operable unit on the far left is the Chrome 6 project. So with all the treatment of Chrome 6, we're producing an acre-foot of water at about $588. Verdugo Park, which I mentioned and indicated is currently shut down. Okay. I don't know. He is, by the way, he is an engineer. So at Verdugo Park, our costs had elevated quite a bit. This is to the 2 wells there required not only just the cost of getting the water out of the ground, but also treatment at that particular site. And as we do with all of our locally produced water, we blend it with MWD water as well. The Glorieta wells are doing, from a cost-effective basis, much better, very good, in fact. And generally speaking, locally produced water is significantly less than the water we purchase from MWD, even though, as Ms. Friedman said, it still is a rather good buy when it comes to other commodities. Recycled water that we're currently getting at $154 an acre foot, that's something that we also need to cultivate a lot more. And Ms. Friedman, again, mentioned it's not just the water. We're part owners of the Glendale, Los Angeles water treatment facility. This is a wastewater treatment facility. Sits down at basically Colorado on the 5 freeway. And we own half capacity of that, which means our wastewater is treated there, but we also get back the recycled water that comes out of that facility. It produces for us about 8,000 acre feet a year. A part of that goes to Pasadena as part of a deal we made with them. We use probably 2/3 of the rest of the allocation. We also have the ability to buy more from LA if we could in fact find a use for it. In other words, if we can get it from the plant to the end use, we can use that water. And that's where we really need to focus. But again, it's not cheap. Not cheap to put the pipes in the ground. It's not cheap to transmit and distribute that water. But it is something we're very, very much interested in looking at and further developing. And then there's the MWD water, which is primarily our source of water for the city of Glendale. About 70% of our water is purchased through MWD. So, what do we do now? Conservation, that's kind of where we've focused at, not just for the current, because this can no longer be episodic behavior. We have a drought, we'll behave one way, drought's over, we go back to our normal practices. You've heard this before, I'm certainly not the one who's coined this phrase, but this is a way of life for us in California. To be water wise, water conscious, and to be conserving at every step that we can. The good news is, here in Glendale, that philosophy has taken a foothold, and we're very proud of that. Since 2006, if you look at our consumption levels in 2006 versus today, we're using 17% less water. Think of that, from 2006 to today, with a pretty fair amount of development that's occurred in the last several years, we're still using almost 20% less water than we did. That's attributable to the residents and businesses in the city who are taking this seriously. But we need to do more. We need to do more. So we, at this point in time, have our voluntary conservation measures in place. Let me go back. It's in place, but we've never taken it off the books. In 2006, we put the phase 1 voluntary measures in place, and the council has never removed those. We have our no water waste policy, which is in place at all times. And I don't know that a lot of people realize that, but these practices, policies, and procedures are all in place. We did go back in 2007 to mandatory as things got worse, and things got worse at MWD, our supplier. And that lasted a couple years, and council took that or withdrew that phase 2 mandatory once water supplies increased. But council never took back the phase 1 voluntary or the no water waste policies. So things like, Ms. Friedman and I had an email discussion. It's raining, you gotta make sure your sprinklers are off. You're not supposed to be watering your lawn when it's raining. You're not supposed to hose down your driveway or your patio or your walkways, ever. Ever. Under our policy, you're not supposed to do it, period. Whether it's the dead of winter, the peak of summer, you're just not supposed to do it. So we've got a lot of procedures that are in place, and people are practicing these, and you see it. And we see it, very poignantly through the consumption numbers that we have. So I think that as we continue to move on, that philosophy needs to continue to grow. And a combination of these things that we're doing, as I said, the infrastructure, developing our own local water supply, and then good reaction and response and participation from our customers is going to help us ease some of the burden that's being placed on us as a result of these various issues that you've heard talked about already. One of the things we have a what's next slide here, but I think we've talked a lot about these already. Do we need to go to mandatory? We don't feel we need to go to mandatory right now. That wouldn't be our recommendation to the city council, but it's right there ready if we need to. And of course, again, with MWD being a major supplier to the city of Glendale, we kind of take their lead when they do, and how they react and what their projections are for going forward. Our community outreach effort is in full swing. You see these two young ladies over here at the table. They are working virtually full-time on water conservation issues. And we have a team that is just, through every media outlet we can, locally or in-house and outside, and getting the message out about water conservation. It's become our full-time effort in our public relations department. And part of that's continue to educate and inform about the water situation for the future. It's keeping the residents informed on what's happening, keeping them up to date. Obviously this is a hot topic in the press. Whether it stays that way or not, we'll see, whatever the next best story is. But you can rest assured we'll continue to keep you posted on the situation as it affects Glendale. And then member agency collaboration. That's something that we do on a continuous basis, but I think that joint effort is even more important as we hit critical periods like we are now. And Ramon is already working with Crescenta Valley Water District on a couple of key areas and seeking some grants for reclaimed water development. Our hope is that we see Sacramento pass down a bunch of money aimed at facilitating reclaimed projects. And we're poised to jump on that as soon as it happens. That'll help us get the funds we need to build the infrastructure. We can get that reclaimed water from the plant and distribute it to Glendale. And even if we're just making sure that all of our parks are irrigated, we've got some folks that are interested in putting it into their buildings, dual piping buildings, and using it for their gray water component. But if we can do that, we can greatly take advantage of water that is now, for the most part, being poured down the LA River. The vast majority of the water produced at the water treatment plant is put in the LA River and goes to the ocean. That's a waste. That water could be used, and we just need to get it from point A to point B and make use of that. And obviously, we continue our partnership with MWD. We're an original member, we have a board member, and we'll coordinate with them to the benefit of our community. And again, as I said, we have our media and our public outreach, and that will continue. These ladies are excited. Look at them. They can't wait to get out and get that message going to schools, to social clubs, to groups. If you're involved in any other groups that you'd like us to come and talk to, we are more than happy to do that. We want to preach the word. We're on a mission. Here's some water saving programs that we can also go through our conservation office. A lot of people don't realize that we offer a pretty wide range, and we're trying to further augment this through some grant programs. But re-landscaping and appliances, we've got lighting and other water-wise tips that we can pass along, and opportunities for folks to save money and conserve water at the same time. So these are all available. We have information over at the table. I encourage you to pick that up before you go. You can always just give us a call directly at Water and Power, and we'll get you to the right person. But if it's for your business, if it's for your house, recently we've had a number of people call about re-landscaping. They want to tear out their grass. They want to put in native plants. They want to do drip irrigation. And there's ways for us to help facilitate that, and also point you in the right direction where you might get some financial assistance to do that as well. So any ideas you have in that regard, let us know, and we'd be happy to help you with that. And I think I'm going to turn this over now to Ramon, because he has with us our guest who has an absolute success story on conservation in the corporate world that we wanted to share with you.
Purpose of my contribution here is to encourage investment, to encourage property owners, landlords, and even residential water customers to invest into their properties. There are proven methods, and as Laura said, these things are not done overnight. This is a long-term contribution, a long-term commitment. We can't just not do nothing. We have to be active in doing something. So I'm just repeating what Laura said, and I completely agree with that. So what we have here are two charts. At the top, we have our landscape water conservation, and at the bottom, our domestic water conservation, which is our toilets, our water, domestic water source. 2007 is our base year, so that was the year that we decided that we were going to roll out a water conservation program. So that's showing you what our output per cubic foot was in 2007. So that's where we decided to roll this out. In 2008, we started our investment program, landscape satellite controller. In 2009, we installed a drip irrigation system and high efficiency sprinkler nozzles. You could see from 2008 to 2009 a significant drop in water. In 2010, unfortunately, we foresaw a leak in our irrigation system, ate up some of our savings. 2011 was a really bad year. We had a really horrible leak in our landscape system, and we wanted to be proactive. What can we do to mitigate that? What can we do to put a more aggressive and robust system into our landscaping? So we investigated and found that there is a leak detection system that you could install into your properties, as well as a water budgeting program. Basically what that means is that we could program our irrigation system to cap. So once every day we reach a certain gallon amount, it stops irrigating. So it's one or the other. So that makes for a far more robust irrigation conservation program. And as you could see in 2012, we went back down to 2009 levels, proving that our investment is paying off. In 2013, we made a very large investment, and we completely re-landscaped our courtyard, removing a lot of our greenery, and we installed what's called xeriscaping, which is more drought-tolerant landscaping into our landscape, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if you were to look at 2013 versus 2007, you could see how drastic our water conservation program has made. It's been significant. And these numbers are numbers provided by GWP. So they're real, they're factual, they're actual. So we wanted to share that information. And also, Mr. Kightlinger was saying, let's reduce by 20%. So I wanted to give you the percentages. So landscaping alone, since 2007, we've reduced our landscaping water conservation by 24%. Granted, 2014 will have a whole year of that xeriscape landscape conservation, so we're foreseeing even lower water consumption in 2014 going forward. Our domestic water conservation, we started with waterless urinals, auto flush valves, auto faucets. 2011, that was our doom year. We saw another leak in our domestic water system, but we continued to press forward in our investments. 2012, we went back down. 2013, we revamped our domestic water pump system. You could see that that was a drastic water conservation method as well. So again, if we're comparing 2013 to 27, you could see the drastic water levels go down because of this program. Again, it's not done overnight. It's done progressively, and they're quantifiable. And that is a 56% water reduction from 2013 to 2007. So let's talk about dollars and cents. Does it really make sense? Are we really saving money? What is our return on our investment? Well, calculating based on our base year of 2007 and the water reduction every year, and then we multiply that by the cost per cubic square foot, we have saved $90,000 since 2007. That's pretty astronomical for our property. And once we started doing this investigation and analysis, it really has paid off. So what's the return on our investment? Our costs have been about $177,000, including our re-landscaping. We tap into every rebate we possibly can. We're backing that out. Our water cost savings, all of the maintenance from the investments that we've made, we've backed that out. We have now to pay back $53,000. That's another couple of years of water savings. So your return on investment, it's not a 5-year payback. We're talking about even a 1.5 to 2 years, possibly stretching it out to 3 years. Does it make sense? It absolutely does. We're encouraging you to make this investment into your properties. So some fun facts. I want to show some fun facts. Domestic water, can you go back? Domestic water, we've saved 6 million gallons of water through our domestic water program. We've saved 5.5 million gallons of our domestic water. Collectively, that's 12 million gallons of water since 2008. That equates to being able to fill up 18 Olympic-sized pools. Now, Mr. Kightlinger said that an acre of water is 330,000 gallons. Okay, that means that not only do we fill 18 Olympic-sized pools, that's 36 acres of water that we're saving, tapping into what you're saying. So we wanted to encourage you, let you know that there are proven methods to water conservation, and it's not just putting money into the program, it's getting money out of the program as well. So the last slide. The picture on your left is our courtyard, which was it's beautiful. It was very water demanding. It was very water hungry. We made an investment. We revamped our courtyard to the right. It's still very beautiful, quite frankly. I think it's more beautiful. It's functional. We have water drought-tolerant plantscapes. We even added trees to our landscaping. We made sure that we invested into even a fountain that saved water with a chemical system and a good pumping system. And on the bottom are just pictures of other water conservation programs that we've also tapped into rebates. So that wraps it up for our properties, and we just hope that you're encouraged and motivated to do the same at your property, your home, your apartment complex.
Thank you, Lillian. I think this is an extremely serious subject that the public needs to pay attention to, and it's going to require all of us to continue those efforts.